Welcome to Two Deep Hokies Under the Influence, a Sons of Saturday podcast. I'm your host, Pete B, and I've got a co-host here. It's not Sam Jesse, but Robert Irby is kind enough to join me. He's contributed to the Sons of Saturday for a while from the Sports Business Journal. He's legit. Rob, thanks for being here, man.
I don't know about legit. I would more quantify myself as Sam's understudy, but I'll take the compliment.
Well, listen, I love when you're on the show because a lot of our thoughts align on a lot of different things. We're going to see if they align on some of the toughest games on Virginia Tech's schedule, the pecking order of ACC quarterbacks, and some ACC win total over-unders. We're going to get to all that stuff in just a little bit. But for now, why don't you kick us off with a cheers?
Yeah, I'd like to give a cheers. Unfortunately, Hokie baseball did lose today, just like softball last week. I would say cheers to Virginia Tech sports can't hurt us for another 4 months.
Cheers to that, man. Cheers. Look at this frothy boy. Oh yeah,
man.
That's a lot of calories in that puppy. I can already tell. But it's very good. We'll talk about our beers a little bit later as well. Some news and notes to kick us off. CBS Sports put out their annual coaching rankings. Brent Pry came in at number 63. They only rank 68 because they do the power teams. Just 5 guys behind our head man. He was 50th last year, if my calculations are correct. So dropped 13 spots, and it's not a stunning list. The guys behind him, the guys right in front of him. Do you think that 63 is fair?
I think 63 is a little harsh. Like I saw names like Mike Locksley and Sam Pittman on there, which those guys are just dead men walking in their jobs. And maybe you could say the same thing about Pry. It's natural you're going to dip some because some of those names below him last year have since been fired. But I don't know. It was pretty bleak to look at. Not going to lie.
Yeah, it's tough when the only guys behind him are David Braun, Tony Elliott, Brett Brennan, Frank Reich, the interim coach at Stanford, and Jeff Lebby came in last place. I kind of feel bad for Jeff Lebby that Frank Reich's getting over him too, considering Frank hasn't been in college in quite a while. But
that was pretty rough for me to see. I was like, dang, Jeff Lebby, man, you're not that bad.
Sharon Moore down at 58, despite taking over a recent national champ. He's got some questions to answer because the offense was so bad last year. He's an offensive guy, and they have this new high-priced quarterback coming in. So that 58 is going to change because I feel like either he lives up to what Harbaugh tabbed him as like the next good coach at Michigan, or he falls on his face and he ends up getting fired. I'm not sure how that'll play out.
Yeah, I mean, there's no such thing as an average season at Michigan or any school in that ilk, because it's like you're either contending for a national championship or you're disappointing. So no, you're right. I think he either ends up like in like the bottom 8 or he's ascending and becoming this top 30 coach, next star kind of deal.
Where do you think Belichick came in? Because that would be a tough one to rank. Do you have a guess?
Man, I would hope it wouldn't be higher than like 50.
He was 54. So he's not getting the benefit of the doubt as a college coach, according to the panel of rankers at CBS. He came in at 54, and I think that's about right because this whole thing is starting to get real messy with the girlfriend and now fiance. And
yeah, I was going to say, where did Jordan Hudson rank?
How about Steven Belichick? Because he's the coach in waiting, it seems. Like that's going to be fascinating what happens there. But 54 for him. Hugh Freeze, how the mighty have fallen at 47. 47 for Hugh Freeze. He took a pretty steep drop from a year ago. Another guy with a lot to prove. Some last couple notables from the ACC. Narduzzi at 37. Does Narduzzi deserve to be almost 30 spots ahead of Pry? Getting close, 25 spots ahead of Pry?
In a vacuum, no. But if you think about it, 37, that's perfectly in the middle.
Yeah.
And that is what Pitt as a football team is. They are the 7
and he did win an ACC
team.
title, right? So
being ranked 37th is the equivalent of going 7-5.
Some guys that were a little bit higher were Brent Key at 30, which I like Brent Key. I don't know if he warrants 30. And then he had Doran at 31, which I'm not a Doran guy. He dropped pretty significantly as well this year. I think he might have been like in the teens last year. So Doran comes in at 31, and I still think that might be too high because I know he's had some decent seasons, not too many losing seasons, but what has he ever really won?
No, I mean he is NC State's all-time winningest coach, but that's almost by default. Like it's just, you're maxing out at 8 or 9 wins there. They have no tradition of doing anything better than that.
Yeah, and I think if I'm an NC State fan at this stage in the game, I'm ready to move on from Dave Doran. That would be my opinion, but I think there's a little bit of confliction there of like, well, the grass isn't always greener, but like, how green is the grass now? I think, and this year will be another rubber meets the road. I mean, you're seeing these guys that are in the 50s, the 30s, the 40s. All of these guys have things to prove. That's why they're down there where they are.
Yeah, and I think the interesting point with Dorn is I almost wonder with the NC State fans, I almost wonder if Will Wade being their basketball coach and, the wins he's already getting in the transfer portal, if he turns this into, they're a top 3 team in the ACC, which I think is very possible, then if you're an NC State fan, you're thinking, wait, maybe the grass is greener. Maybe we don't have to settle for mediocrity. We can go out and find a dude and he can turn it around just like that. Not saying they will, but I'm just saying that might get the gears turning if they have another 7-5 type season.
I think Virginia Tech and NC State are very similarly aligned in terms of what they can do financially, what they can recruit, the passion of their fans. They're very similar. Now, we had the higher high with Beamer and all that kind of stuff and the great run we went on, but that's been put to the side now. And we're kind of like, both, are we going to ever be good for us again and them really ever? They've had 1 10-win season in ever, I think, for NC State. So
yep.
I like them for that reason because there are the similarities there. And if I'm them, I think they deserve a little bit more. I think like a trip to the ACC title game once in the past 15, 16 years, however long it's existed, would have been nice. I guess we're getting close to 20 years now. So final coach rank I'll give is Beamer. Shane Beamer comes in at 28. I think it's good. I think it's fair.
I think that's fair. Like that's the range for a coach that's like right on the cusp. And he is, but also he can drop below 40 if they don't have a great season, which I think you and I are both on the train that they will not have a great season.
And we can talk about them a little bit when we get to the toughest games. We'll address Beamer, South Carolina, and what to expect. There's a new NCAA in town, potentially, Rob, and that's the College Sports Commission. It's this kind of newfangled rules enforcement committee that was Tennessee at the head of this, trying to get together this new group of people that, well, basically could enforce things and not allow the power conferences to sue them. That's what this new college. There was an article that came out. Ross Dellinger is always at, the head of these things, behind these these kind of inside the stuff you don't really want to talk about, but it is part of college football. Do you think this College Sports Commission thing has legs?
I absolutely think it does. And maybe I'm just wearing rose-colored glasses, but I think that ultimately, like, if you go back to the NCAA for decades, like enforcing their own rules, be it archaic rules or not, has always been their biggest hangup. And I mean, even like I'm sitting here thinking about like the UNC cheating scandal where they just wash their hands of it and called it an institutional issue, or the Jim Harbaugh thing. Well, the other thing, the Connor Stallions thing, where like it doesn't matter what punishments they give Jim Harbaugh now. Damage has been done. He got his natty and he got the F out of there. Like, and they sat on their hands and like the evidence was there. And if you had an organization like solely committed to, giving out these prompt rulings, like no professional league, like the NBA doesn't spend 2 years investigating things. Like they snap to a decision like that. And I'm bullish on that idea. I think especially with like the NIL regulations that will come with the House settlement and that like Deloitte clearinghouse thing, like all of it, they're going to need some serious enforcement. And I think it's beyond what the NCAA can do really from a manpower.
Manpower, the respect factor. People are like
Yeah.
more or less ignoring some of the stuff that comes down from the NCAA now. If you have all agreed to it as conferences, although we've seen allegiances to conferences fade, you would think that it would be more enforceable. It could be quicker because there's not going to be a backlash. Like, hey, did you cheat? Yeah, you cheated. All right, you're penalized. Like, let's move on. We'll see. I'm skeptical. I'm skeptical of the House ruling coming down in a reasonable period of time because I think there's a lot of flaws with it, and that's the boring stuff. So we can stop talking about that. You mentioned baseball getting eliminated today by Clemson. I think that was 6-1. They did beat Stanford, which was a nice win, but we will not be in the NCAA tournament. It doesn't seem like. And sadly, the softball team was eliminated from their regional. Alabama took them down. And like you said, we can't be hurt by anything anymore for the summer. From now on, it's going to be recruiting news, some preview magazines, and all that kind of good stuff before we get to Labor Day. But if you're watching on YouTube, make sure you like the video and make sure you're subscribed to the Sons of Saturday. We've picked up a lot of subscribers since the Metallica concert. Got a lot of rock fans, metal fans that are now tuned into this, Rob. So that's why you're rocking that stash over there.
Yeah, I was going to say apologies to all of you thinking this is a rock and roll podcast and you turn it on, there's some dork with a mustache. Apologies.
It's so metal, Rob. I
Welcome to the ride. Metal in the Dave Matthews sense, right?
Yes. Yes. VT's 5 toughest games. Let's dive into this before we do our ad read, before we do our beer break.
Yeah.
I wanted to get your take on our 5 toughest games. And this is kind of the crux of this is what does toughest mean to you, right? Because for me, Miami is potentially the best team on our schedule, but it's at home and we play Miami really well. So is it actually the toughest game? So these are the kind of things that I've kind of gone through. So I kind of did it as Rob, least likely to get a W is how I would view toughest. And you may view it however you want, but that's kind of how I'm thinking it. So number 1 toughest game for Virginia Tech on the 2025 schedule. What is your number 1?
I think I'm going to go with South Carolina. I think that just the pedigree there, the emotion of it, the playing in a neutral site in Atlanta, the SEC caliber opponent. We don't usually do well in Atlanta. I think that there's a lot on the table there, and to me, that feels like one where I know Shane's going to be motivated. I'm sure Shane wants to beat the hell out of us, so I'll say that's the toughest.
That is not my number 1, but reasons I almost put it number 1 were because of the spotlight aspect. There is a certain can we really climb this mountain of a neutral site game against a power conference team that's coming off a great year and get the win? But that psychology doesn't match up with the team that we'll be facing, in my opinion. I don't think South Carolina is as good of a team as some of the other teams on this schedule. But it's not in their house. It is at a neutral site, although there will be a ton of South Carolina fans at this thing. I think we'll represent well, but I think we will be outnumbered. But it is not my number 1. My number 1 least likely W is Louisville. I think even though it's in Blacksburg, Braum has a heavy coaching advantage over Brent Pry. He's a very good coach. He went out and got Miller Moss, who we're going to talk about in our later segment. And they crushed us the last time we played them. Now, that game was in Louisville, but I just view that as an extremely difficult game at a tough part of the season. And so like I said before, I think Miami is probably the best team on the schedule, but we have a history with Miami. It's a rivalry, whether they think it is or not. It's a rivalry to us, and we darn near beat a top 10 Miami just last year. So for me, a team that's never come to Blacksburg, we don't really know what we're going to get. And I think Braum is a really good coach. And even though they're again hitting some portal again, like lots of guys changing, new quarterback, all that stuff, that game scares me. So I'm going to put Louisville as the least likely W on our schedule, the toughest game on our schedule. What's your number 2?
I'm going to go with the other trip to Atlanta, Georgia Tech. And I think we might have varying opinions on Georgia Tech because I'm a huge Brent Key guy. I'm big on the Haynes combo, all of it. I think, Georgia Tech is a very solid team. They're good at home. And I think the key part for me is like situationally, you look at how the schedule breaks down. This will be Virginia Tech's 7th game in 7 weeks. So it's the week before the bye. Might be running out of gas a little bit. Wake won't be a tough game the week before, but ultimately, like, I expect some guys to be banged up, and I think that Georgia Tech is just, as long as King and Haynes are healthy, I just think that they're a bad matchup for Tech, and I just don't see us getting a road W like that.
That is also my number 2 game. So
Okay.
I've not put South Carolina in yet. It's Louisville, and then it's at Georgia Tech, because Bobby Dodd it's tough. No matter what Georgia Tech's doing, that's just a tough place to play. Haynes King is awesome. I think he's a really good quarterback. And Brent Key, I'm not as high on him as maybe you are or Billy is. I know Billy really likes him, but he's a solid coach. Potential for it to be a close game. Pry has not shown a propensity to win close games. So yes, Georgia Tech at Georgia Tech is my second toughest game. What's your number 3?
I'll go with Miami. I certainly understand the angle of, like, we always play Miami well at home, and it's a big spot. It'll be senior day, all that sort of thing. But I think I agree that Miami is the best team we play all year, and so to me, I think that that's the toughest home game, and it's gonna be it's gonna be really difficult.
I have South Carolina at 3. So it's Louisville at Georgia Tech, and then South Carolina on the neutral site. And the reason it's tough is obviously Lenore Sellers and Stewart, young talent, good transfers coming in. They hit the transfer portal pretty well. But Shane, in his own right, lost 3 close ones last year. They did get the nice close win against Clemson, but 3 close losses, replacing a ton. There are 18 guys from that South Carolina team last year that are on NFL rosters today. Not all of them are going to be on NFL rosters come September 1st, but as of today, they have got a lot. They had a ton of draft picks. They had a ton of guys at the combine. Talent is walking out the door at an unprecedented level for South Carolina. You'd have to go back to some of the Spurrier teams to even get close. And so with them potentially feeling a little cocky coming into Atlanta after last year, pun intended, we will definitely not be cocky. I think playing that underdog role, playing Shane Beamer, who, while he is doing a lot of the great rah-rah stuff, a lot of stuff that's similar to Pry in terms of the momentum building, and he actually capitalized on it last year with a really high-quality roster. I think there's a potential to kind of get them in a tricky spot. We got 2 new coordinators, a little bit of an element of surprise. I know they're replacing their offensive coordinator as well, but they've lost so much. Like, that defense has been gutted. And again, I know they're bringing in portal guys, but some high-end guys went out the door. So I don't see South Carolina as this juggernaut. I think for Pry and the staff, the bigger thing they have to attack is the moment and how they motivate this team to go into that game. But it is my third toughest game on the schedule for me. So moving to number 4, give me your top 3 again, and then your 4th.
Yeah, so I had South Carolina number 1, and I will say I do think something that does work to Tech's advantage, to your point, is also 2 new coordinators, no tape on Tech, no idea what they're going to do. That's hard to prepare for. Flip side, new offensive coordinator at South Carolina as well. But so I had South Carolina 1, Georgia Tech 2, Miami 3. I'll go Louisville 4.
Okay.
It's a really good team. Brom's a great coach. He always has a stacked portal class. And then I think also, if you look at his tradition with quarterbacks, he makes chicken salad out of what all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Turned Aiden O'Connell into somehow an NFL quarterback, former walk-on. Jack Plummer even had a cup of coffee with the Panthers, and that guy's terrible. He just turned Tyler Shuck, who everyone thought was dead, into a top 40 pick.
It's crazy what he did with Shuck.
And I mean, I did not care for that pick for the Saints one bit, but we talked about that on our draft show. But and then Yeah, and I think he can do a lot with Miller Moss, and it's just one of those situations where you see a kind of like a fearless quarterback. He's almost like one of those guys that's going to be motivated by hearing Enter Sandman. Some guys get freaked out by it, and some people get fired up by it, and he seems like the kind of guy that wants to go into Blacksburg and silence the crowd.
Yeah, for sure. I'm thinking of his XFL clip that we've all seen, right? Like when he comes out, he's playing in the XFL and they're like interviewing him on the field. If you haven't seen it, look up Jeff Brom XFL. So my fourth team is Miami. So our top four are the same, just in different orders. But number 4 is Miami because although I do believe it's the best team we'll face, talent-wise, overall, it's Mario Cristobal, who, if you're going to talk about coaching levels, not recruiting, not where they are, but like just in-game coaching, I don't think Pry and Cristobal are all that far apart. And so we took him to the limit last year, probably should have won the game, and we get him in Blacksburg. So that's why it's my fourth one. Number 5, I will go first, and this was between a handful of teams, but I was really coming down to at Florida State and at NC State, which should be my 5th toughest game. I'm going to go with at Florida State. Doak Campbell can be really tough. They'll be much improved over last year, but Castellanos is whatever. That's why this isn't even just a little bit higher. And we've won in Tallahassee before. So I'm going to put FSU at number 5. What's your number 5 toughest game for Tech this year?
Yeah, I have no interest in putting NC State or Florida State there. I think both of those teams are going to be really bad.
Okay.
I think Florida State especially is going to suck. And I think by the time we play them in Tallahassee, they have an interim head coach.
Quit factor?
Yeah, right. I am actually going to go with, and this might sound stupid, but I guess it's not that stupid considering last year. I'm going to go with Vanderbilt.
Good one.
And I think, and I mean, well, yeah, I guess I'm thinking Pavia's back, right? Because he got that ruling to get that extra year of eligibility back from when he played JUCO. I don't know, man. We haven't beaten an SEC team since 2016. It's just hard to project that. And even though it's in Blacksburg, coaching advantage, Jerry Kill, absolutely. And Clark Lee, I guess, but who's the actual head coach? Yeah, I don't love it.
No, it's a good one, man. And I considered it, but I went with the road games in that spot. I already talked a little bit about why I like NC State, but Vanderbilt week 2, if we somehow pull off the win against South Carolina, that Vanderbilt game becomes super scary, right? Like that is the Tech way to go down, get a big victory on Labor Day, and then to lay an egg at home like that. So it's really the challenge of Tech, not only beating South Carolina, but the odds of us getting both of those games are so ridiculously low.
Yeah. I mean, again, statistically speaking, we haven't beat an SEC team since the Belk Bowl comeback in 2016. So odds are against us here.
Yeah, but Vandy's good, and maybe I should have put them higher on my list. But as it stands, my toughest games were Louisville, at Georgia Tech, South Carolina, Miami, at FSU.
I don't hate it.
I did note that Louisville, we've talked about their portal thing a couple times already. 51st in the net portal rankings for Louisville. And that's from On3. 51st. Okay. So that means they take out what left the program, they add what came in, and they give them a net ranking. We're up at 25. Miami's like 5th. There's some other teams that are in our conference that are pretty high up there, but Louisville is down there, and they've been one of those teams that's been at the top of the net rankings the last couple of years because they brought in so many guys. So I'm curious how that looks, but the quarterback piece of it is something we'll get into in just a second. A last note on that portal ranking: Georgia Tech, 63rd of 70 teams in that net portal ranking, 63 out of 70. So they have not replenished, Singleton and some of those other guys that have left.
Yeah, Singleton was a huge loss. No way to sugarcoat that. And a program like Georgia Tech doesn't just have guys in the pike that they can just throw in there after a player like that leaves.
Yeah. The last thing I wanted to say about just looking at some of the tough games were who was in ESPN's way too early top 25. And that's mainly a Schleybaugh thing. I don't know how much he talks to other people, but it's ESPN's way too early top 25. South Carolina, number 11. I think they're 16th in the SP plus and 11th by Joel Klatt going into next year. Miami's at number 21 in the way too early top 25, and Louisville at number 22. Those are just the teams that are on our schedules because SMU was in the top 25 as well. But South Carolina getting a lot of love inside that 20 mark all over the country. I don't think they should be that high. It's very reminiscent of the UNC 2021 ranking when they brought back Sam Howell but lost a lot of everything else.
Yeah, I love that comp. I saw you tweet that earlier, and I was like, that is spot on. I love it.
I appreciate that, Rob. Yeah, and the difference, there's a couple differences. One, the UNC game was in Blacksburg. Were you still in school then, or were you already out?
No, I was out.
Okay. And then it was Fuente who, for whatever reason, all of his flaws, managed to be a great game one coach.
Oh, yeah.
And probably hasn't fallen on his face in in every week one, I guess, right? Because we beat ODU. But two games stand out that were not so good in week one for Brent Pry. So we're going to have to kind of reverse some of that juju for him. All right. Any final comments on schedule or anything you want to point out here? Like that Cal game, like at home, I guess we shouldn't be as worried about that with all the turnover coming there. Is there any other of these games that kind of like, I don't know about that one?
Yeah, Cal sucks. I don't know. Honestly, and I don't want to put the cart before the horse, but between Old Dominion, Wofford, Wake, Cal, and UVA, I think those are going to be 5 really bad teams. I feel bad for Wake. They're basically having to overhaul the whole thing, and they bring in Jake Dickert, who's a great coach, but there's just so much uncertainty there.
It's not going to be good right away. Wake they're digging out of a hole right now. And so I'm actually hoping to go to that Wake game on 10-4. That should be good weather and hopefully a good game for the Hokies when we take on Wake Forest on October 4th. All right, let's take a second to talk about our sponsor and do a beer break. The Two Deep Hokies Under the Influence podcast is brought to you by Roback. You guys know Roback, the performance activewear designed for those who crave activity. They had the new drop a couple weeks, maybe. Okay, so maybe it's not that new. The exciting whites. You got the quarter zip, you got the hoodie. They're both very fresh with the VT logos on them. But they also put out the new Hokie Tracks polo. Are you a fan of the Hokie Tracks logo, Rob? Like if you were buying a magnet for your car, would that be something you'd go after, or would that be a little bit farther down?
I am into a tasteful amount of Hokie Tracks.
Okay.
I don't know if a shirt littered with them is my cup of tea, but there's plenty of other great products at Roback.
That is for sure.
Not going to kill the ad read here.
No. I appreciate the honesty because a lot of people are tweeting like that shirt is fire when they see those Hokie Tracks. I personally love my Lane Stadium one, and I've got the Commonwealth, which is the traditional Virginias. You can't go wrong with that one. But they got them all. They got flavors for anyone who likes any of these different type of ET polos. They're really putting them out. And if you got 2 colleges in the house, which I know Rob does, you can grab a polo from another school as well. So use code 2DEEPVT to get 20% off your order. If you've already ordered using an email, use your work email, use your wife's email. Get it done. Load up your cart. They've got all kinds of great stuff on that site, including tons of ladies' things. Code 2DEEPVT for 20% off your order. Roback Crave Activity.
That was a good reminder, actually. My father-in-law is about to turn 60, diehard Clemson fan. I guess I know what I'm getting him for his birthday. So there you go.
It's a great gift, man, because they're not cheap. We all know that. And, Hokie fans come from all different shapes and sizes of means. And so I know not everyone's like into Roback because it costs too much. But for a gift, if you're looking for one really good gift that someone's going to love, use code 2DVT to get 20% off that gift because Father's Day is coming up and people will love it. All right. ACC quarterbacks. This is going to be fun. And just to get us kicked off here, Rob, I'm going to put up the graphic from the Ultimate College Football Show, which is a 247 show. And Smoke Dixon and Bud Elliott both put out their top 5 ACC quarterback rankings. Both of them had Cade Klubnik number 1, Carson Beck number 2, and Haynes King number 3. It varied a little bit at 4 because Dixon had Jennings, Elliott had Miller Moss, who we've already mentioned. And then at 5 for both of these guys was Darian Mensah, the newcomer, kid that comes over from Tulane, is, got that big check from Duke, from what we've heard. All the NIL numbers are kind of hard to believe sometimes, but Mensah got paid to go to Duke, and he comes in at number 5 for both of them. I am curious, how does your list align with these guys? What do you got number 1?
Yeah, so I have the same 5 as Smoke Dixon, but it's just in a different order. But number 1, I do have Cade Klubnik. He's had a lot of criticism over his career, and rightly so. I mean, a Clemson quarterback's always going to be graded with a fine-tooth comb, but he quietly had an incredible season last year. And I think if Clemson would have had more, there was the game that they dropped, believe it was to Louisville at home. That one plus the South Carolina game, if they flip those two results, I think Klubnik would have been in the Heisman race last year. Truly. I mean, that synergy between him and Garrett Riley was real. And he's always going to have a handful of uh-oh plays. That's just what he is. But he's making a lot of smart reads. He can run the ball well, and they finally have some pass catchers for him. So I think the sky's the limit for Cade.
Yeah, 43 total touchdowns last year. Until I kind of went through this exercise, I didn't realize he put up some Heisman-esque numbers. Only 6 interceptions in 14 games, 78.7 QBR. It was, I want to say that was good for top 25. And then just the low point for him, I think, was his 148 passer rating. Like, that wasn't as good. Now, he's a good runner, and so that factors more into the QBR, which was actually 15th nationally. I said top 25. It was, hold on a second. No, that was King. Klubnik. No, that's right. 15th nationally in QBR. So he had a great season, and it started off really rough in that Georgia game, and he turned it around. And that is a popular pick. Everyone's really blowing smoke for Cade Klubnik. I am going to go with Haynes King. And some of this, I'm not trying to be different. I'm not trying to zag. But if you look at the numbers, 25 total TDs for Haynes King, just 2 interceptions for him in what amounts to about 10 games because he was dealing with injuries.
Yep.
He had a better QBR and a better passer rating than Klubnik. And King played much better against Georgia, as I just indicated by telling you how bad Klubnik was in week 1. Now, I know it's week 1 and things change and whatnot, but same opponent. King was much better QBR, better passer rating. To me, Haynes King, if they were given the same talent, I think he's the better quarterback. Now, will he have a better season? Probably not, because he lost Singleton. They're not as good of a team. He lost some of that great offensive line that Georgia Tech had last year. But I think Haynes King is the best quarterback in the ACC. 2 is Klubnik. Again, 43 total touchdowns is just ridiculous. Who is your 2 and 3?
So 2, I actually have Kevin Jennings 2. And I'm a big Kevin Jennings fan. I think he definitely was much maligned due to that playoff game, which was kind of SMU's only opportunity to really be in the spotlight. But I think once you look at SMU and kind of how they had that slow start and people were like, all right, these guys are frauds. It was really when they invested fully in Kevin Jennings is when the season turned around and they became one of the top teams in the country, in the conference. He's a great dual threat guy, and it's kind of like Haynes King too, where he just has this almost sixth sense of he's just a baller. You know what I mean? And I don't have numbers in front of me, but
that Clemson game, the ACC title game, like he damn near brought them back and won that thing.
Yeah. Yeah. He was awesome in that second half for sure. After the nightmare start of all nightmare starts.
Yes. All right. So
then 3.
Go ahead.
In 3, I have Haynes King as well. And again, I could go back and forth on Jennings and King. I think they're very similar players. I think the ceiling on Jennings is a little higher. That's why I put him there. I think Haynes King is still very limited in what he can do as a passer. I think he's very much like establish the run, not just with the running back, but with his own legs, and then does a lot of what he does on RPOs and play action and those types of plays. Whereas I feel like Klubnik and Jennings are more able to go through progressions and that sort of thing and make more of those high level throws. But in terms of just being an effective college quarterback, you can't go wrong with Haynes King for sure.
Yeah, he is made to play college quarterback,
Yeah.
and he didn't work out for him at Texas A&M, but him and Brent Key got on the same page, and he's doing well at GT. So I had Haynes King 1, Klubnik 2. My third is Carson Beck, and not the best year last year. You have the Cavender relationship, you have the stolen cars, the big paycheck that he potentially got to go to Miami, but when it's all said and done, he's supposedly healthy. Mario was on record recently talking about that. And he had the 12th best QBR in the country last year. And if you go back to 2023, he was sensational. 7th best QBR in the country in 2023. 167 rating in 2023. Completed 72.4% of his passes in the SEC in 2023. So there is a level that he didn't get to last year, but with some better weapons and maybe a better situation, he could really thrive down in Miami. And so I have Carson Beck number 3, and it was close to Klubnik. Like I almost put Carson Beck number 2,
Oh wow.
behind Haynes King. And that's where these guys have Carson Beck, but they have Klubnik up ahead. But I thought him and Cade Klubnik were very, very close. And before I kind of looked into some stuff, I was following the narrative of like, okay, this guy's distracted. He's dating kind of a celebrity. He's worried about his car. But the numbers don't lie. This has been a very good quarterback. Playing under the spotlight of Georgia is difficult, and it kind of frames it differently. But it's kind of like McCord playing for Ohio State. Like he kind of got painted as like, oh, this guy's not very good. No, he was good. It's just that there are extremely high standards at Ohio State and extremely high standards at Georgia. And so him escaping and going to Miami where there's going to be a lot of talent, I think is a good spot for him. So I've did my 3. It's King, Klubnik, and Beck. Who is your number 4? Is that where you're going to Beck?
Yeah, I have Beck there.
Okay.
I'm not quite as high on him as you are, but I felt that way even when he was back at Georgia, even that year where you did say that he was lighting it up. But I always felt like Georgia made things as easy as possible for him, and I think that and that's not just offensively, but it's also the fact that they have the future Philadelphia Eagles defense, um, and on top of that, running the ball well. And I think the job is easier to play quarterback at Georgia than a lot of other places. But then in those situations where they needed to rely on him, in situations past where Stetson Bennett would come through in those type of situations, Beck typically did not. Like in the Alabama game last year, he was bad
He was
for a long
playing bad,
time.
yeah.
And it was kind of anytime they were in a tight spot, he just wasn't reliable. And maybe I'm picking nits here, but I see the ceiling is certainly high for him. It's probably higher than any quarterback in the conference, truly. But I think the floor is pretty low, and it all just depends on how Miami is able to sort of not simplify things, but just set him up well for success. And maybe I'm just dubious they'll actually do that.
Yeah, it is Miami. There's been a lot of failed expectations over the last 20 years. But just last year, they brought in a quarterback who,
Sure.
before he was the number 1 overall pick, there were questions about Cam Ward. He's coming from Washington State and Incarnate Word. Like, is he really going to go to Miami and be good? Cam Ward was a dog. And if you look at all the stats from last year, he was far and away the best quarterback in the conference. So they just did this. I don't think Beck is that dog that Ward was, but I think that upside they can get very close to it if things kind of go right. Now they've got a tough schedule off the bat, and that could throw a monkey wrench into it. But I think he could go that Kyle McCord route, because you were saying like at Georgia they made it easy for him, and they did. But like McCord had Marvin Harrison Jr. and Emeka Ibuka, and he actually got better when he went to Syracuse. So it can happen. And so I don't love the Cavendish stuff. Like that's not something I feel like is going to be good for him. But I think on the football field, when it's all said and done, he's going to have a very good year. So my number 4 was Jennings. I feel a lot of the ways you do that. We kind of have that Penn State memory in our head. But before that, the Clemson game, he was great. He's got the dual threat ability, 150 passer rating, 28 total touchdowns, the playoff appearance, and he wasn't even playing, the whole season, as you said. So nearly led them to a conference title single-handedly at the end of that game. So he's very,
they
very
almost
good.
ran the table in the ACC. Not just like
which is something you kind of called, and I have to give you your flowers on that because you're on them again, I think, this year, and we'll talk about this in our over-unders. Oh, God, here we go. And you should rub it in because I was wrong. I didn't think they could go 8-0. They went 8-0. They didn't win the conference, but it was close. They really almost did. And so a lot of that was because of Kevin Jennings. Now, when we get to number 5 here, this is where I don't know which direction you're going. I'm curious as to who your number 5 quarterback is in the conference.
I came really close to putting Miller Moss here, but I'm actually going to go with Darian Mensah. And I feel like his stats were pretty good as a true freshman, but I think it's also just the composure that he had that is pretty unique for a kid who was, 18 or 19 years old. A lot of times he was just kind of asked to manage the game. They had an incredible run game in Mekhi Hughes, who's now going to be possibly a Heisman contender at Oregon. Monster. But yeah, just the way that he composed himself in these tight situations for someone so young. And there was an article that some local, maybe it was Washington Post, I don't know. Somebody wrote an article about him and basically how, Tulane had given all this money last year, NIL money, to the kid from Oregon, Ty Thompson. So this former 4-star transfer that they brought in gave a couple $1 million to, and the coaching staff through all of the spring and fall practice looked around and were like, this kid's better. And they had to take the bold step to say, yeah, I know we're paying this guy a crap ton of money, but we're going to put the better player on the field.
Yeah, that's crazy.
And I think that speaks to just the quality of a player that he was even before he'd even played a single game in college. And so I think Duke really it's going to have to be really good for them to get their money's worth. But I would have paid him.
And they're another school that did this last year. They bring in Malik Murphy, and honestly, exceeded my expectations. Like, really did well. Like, and gave us the double birds on the way out. I had Mensah as well in the same spot, number 5. What he did as a freshman in his first few games, having to play K-State, having to play Oklahoma, that was super tough. And he almost beat K-State, who we know is a well-coached team. They went to the conference title game. They ended up losing to Army, but they were on Army's turf. That's a tough situation for a Louisiana school to go up to New York in December and win a game. But he got them there. And I think this was kind of a savvy move by Duke, because if you're trying to mask some of your flaws, the best way to do that is to go spend a lot of money on a quarterback that you think has potential. And this kid as a freshman was already good. We're talking about 166 passer rating. I know it's in the American, but that's as a freshman. And so what could he do with some better talent around him? And Duke is going to have
19th nationally in QBR as well.
Right. Yeah. He was fantastic. So Duke does not have the best roster. We know that, but we've also seen them be able to win under Mike Elko, under Manny Diaz in his first year. So now I think they have a better quarterback than they had a year ago, in my opinion. So it's going to be interesting because Mensah could jump up this list, but I do think year 2, people having tape on you. Moving up to the bigger conference, I think that could lead to a couple of growing pains.
Sure.
I think he's still a good quarterback, but I'm going to put him number 5. And then if we go to number 6 here, I'm going to say Miller Moss. And the reason I want to talk about 6 is because after 6, I think it gets really kind of
gross.
kind of questionable. So Miller Moss would be my 6. And this is another good grab for Brom. Been over it a little bit. Another veteran guy for him. He did Plummer, did Shuck. That's his formula. And if you go back to 2 years ago, Miller Moss was incredible against Louisville in the bowl game. Threw 6 touchdowns and 372 yards against his now coach. So there's a good piece of clay there for Brom to work with. And in my opinion, like better than the last 2.
100%. No doubt. Yeah, I think in terms of like just pure talent, like, yeah, no question. I mean, maybe you could say Shuck was talented because he was a former 5-star, but that was also like
2017.
That was like 3 presidential administrations ago.
It was a while ago. Yeah, yeah. No, I think Miller Moss just has that. He got benched at USC, for those who aren't aware. But he showed potential. Like, he wasn't a complete scrub out there, but it's Lincoln Riley, it's USC. Yeah. And that's the other kind of cool thing about this is that you're going from Lincoln Riley, great quarterback coach, to Jeff Brom, great quarterback coach. Like, this is a match made in heaven, in my opinion. Like, this is going to be really good for Louisville. That's one of the reasons I'm afraid of playing them later this year with a new secondary for the Hokies. So for sure, Miller Moss would be 6. Let's take a quick beer break before we talk about drones and some of the other guys in the ACC and then get to our over-unders. Rob, what are you drinking over there?
I am continuing my Highland Brewing pitch for sponsorship here. This is actually I think this is kind of one of their winter IPAs still. It was packaged in March. I looked at the box. It was one of the last bits of it, but it's the Wishing Star Cold IPA.
Okay.
Makes me think of the Taylor Swift hit Teardrops on My Guitar. The only thing that keeps me wishing on a wishing star. But it's okay. I do like a good wintry cold IPA. You get kind of some of those wintry flavors in there, which again is weird to say right before Memorial Day. So maybe that's why I don't like it as much.
You did it before Memorial Day. You had to get it in.
Yeah.
Now, a cold IPA generally indicates it's brewed cold, right? Like that, not just cold weather. It means it's brewed cold rather than brewed at room temperature.
Yeah, and it's got a little bit of haze to it. It's pretty hoppy. I mean, again, I like it. It's a 6.8 alcohol content. I mean, it's solid. I'd probably give it like a 3.6, I think. Like, I'd drink it again, but if I see other Highland beers on the shelf, I'm probably grabbing something else.
I got you. All right, I am drinking the Other Half Vapor Rings, and this is actually the TDH Vapor Rings. TDH means triple dry hopped, Rob. That's right. Hey. We're going triple. This is an Imperial Oat Cream IPA.
Ooh,
I know. This is some real craft beer nerd shit going on over here. My buddy Alex, who I was hanging out with, him and his kids this past weekend, brought this down. He's a big Other Half guy. He used to live in New York, and they've got their stuff that comes from Brooklyn, but Other Half has a presence in Philly. They got a presence in DC now. But they make some great beers, and this TDH Vapor Rings is good. And although it's a triple, it's 8.4. So it's not 10%. It's a nice, palatable 8.4. I showed it earlier. It's kind of got a pale color, which my ring light is making a little bit lighter, but this is a phenomenal 8.4% beer. I would recommend the TDH Vapor Rings. You get a very creamy kind of like, it's not sweet, but you get that like milk and sugar kind of vibe from it a little bit. So it's not that it's a dessert beer because there is that bitterness on the back end, but like I said at the beginning, there's some calories in this puppy. There's maybe some lactose in this puppy, on the leaning towards milkshake, but it is, it's not that tough to drink. Like, it doesn't feel like I'm being weighed down. So the TDH vapor rings from Other Half, I would recommend it. I also wanted to mention that Dominion Wine and Beer, who used to be a sponsor of the show and my buddy owns, it's right in Falls Church. They're getting some Fidens in right now. And Rob, I don't know if you know about Fidens, but it's another upstate New York brewery, and they make phenomenal beer. So check our Instagram story because I put the link in there. They've got some Fidens, I think not only in the store, but maybe also on tap. But check my story. Dominion does a great job, and I'll give Arash any free advertising he wants because he runs a really good place, both in Gaithersburg and in Falls Church. And finally, they're opening a beer garden I think it's called Stratford Beer Garden right in Falls Church. He's hoping to have it open by October. So some Hokies games at the beer garden sounds cool, but if people who are Nova probably know Dominion Wine and Beer because they've got a great outdoor setup, great bar, whatever. Just wanted to let you guys know about a couple of those things because he's one of the guys who knows Other Half well and introduced me to it early in the game. Arash did, but the vapor rings, I'm going to probably give this. I'm probably going to go 4.25 because it really is. It really is that good.
Dang. I mean, I do love a beer garden. Charlotte is famous for the Charlotte
They
Beer
have
Garden.
A lot of them down in Charlotte.
It has like 50 on, well, there's the Charlotte Beer Garden specifically, and it has like 50 beers on tap. And you always see the meme of like somebody takes a picture of all the taps and it's like, yes, I'll have a Miller Lite, please.
Yes. That's, I went there after the bowl game.
Okay. Yeah.
Me and Sam, Mike McDaniel, a few others managed to meet up afterwards.
Yeah.
There. And like, it was such a long day drinking with Billy Ray, just beating me up in the stands because he's gigantic and getting tipsy.
Pissed off at the game.
Like I really like had to keep it low ABV at that point in the night, but I would love to go to Charlotte Beer Garden like fresh on a Saturday and just sample because the taps were endless.
Yeah, no, it's a really cool place, and they have 3 floors, and then there's a rooftop pavilion as well. So there's 4 different sets of taps. So if this place in Falls Church is like that, it should be pretty cool.
I think this is going to be more of like an outdoor, like Stratford was this motel in Falls Church. And so they bought that area and are turning it into a beer garden. So I think it's going to be kind of like outdoor with a little bit of indoor kind of parking lot style vibes. But
yeah.
Anyway, let's move to the quarterbacks just below there. We won't spend too much time on this, but in my next up group, Rob, I have behind Miller Moss, CJ Bailey, Holstein, Drones, who's ever coming from Syracuse, whether it's Angeli or Collins, Castellanos, and then one more interesting name, Lopez. Yeah. I thought is someone that should be in that next group up. If you had to give me maybe like a top 2 out of that group, are you going with Drones? Are you going with CJ Bailey? Like Holstein, does that speak to you?
Yeah, so I actually had Lopez as my number 7 behind Moss. And this is kind of a similar situation as Mensa, maybe to a lesser degree, but this was a kid who came in as a freshman and was incredibly composed, just had a really, really nice season. And, you know, I'm skeptical about the whole Belichick thing, but I'll be honest, like I raised an eyebrow when they brought in Gio Lopez because I think he's a really, really good player. Definitely more of a run first guy, but you know, he's a left-handed quarterback, wears number 7, runs really well, kind of gives you some, you know, Latino Michael Vick vibes a little bit.
I like it.
And then I had Holstein next. I think Holstein is just a really, really solid player. Anytime you're getting a quarterback from Alabama, like, you know,
he had a bad second half of the season though.
He did. No, he did for sure. And I think there's a lot of growing pains there. And Narduzzi doesn't run the most QB friendly offense in the world. He just doesn't run the best offense in the world. Just straight up.
No,
I like Holstein. I was between Holstein and Bailey there. Because Bailey very rough Bailey around the edges. Very rough around the edges, but he's got a very high ceiling.
Yeah, that's the thing with Bailey. He's got to grow. He's very raw. And in a way, despite being older, Drones is a little raw. We got to see what
Still is,
he
yeah.
does when he gets fully healthy, which he should be nearing
Yeah.
at this point as we approach June. And so I think I'd put Bailey right behind Miller Moss, just me personally.
Okay.
But the case for Lopez is heard. And like I hear, like I have him here. There's an interesting name at the bottom that could rise up, and that's Devin Brown at Cal. Now, Cal has a lot of problems on the roster, but Devin Brown was that Ohio State kid, right? That like was waiting and waiting,
Yeah.
and then it didn't turn out.
Yeah, he wore number 33 like a loser.
So that's someone to keep an eye on. But I think for me, it's Bailey and Drones,
Okay.
and then whoever Syracuse runs out there. Because I like Angeli, but if they
Yeah.
think Ricky Collins is going to beat him out, then I kind of like Ricky Collins. Like I think Angeli, that for people who don't know, Angeli is the one that came in for Notre Dame was it Penn State,
Mhm.
and kind of held down the fort while Riley Leonard came back.
Yeah, or it might have been the Georgia game. It was one of the two, but yeah, I mean, I don't wanna over sensationalize, like, a couple drives from a
I
guy,
know, I
but
know.
I mean, he did look pretty good, and I guess yeah, and I guess I do need to consider him more. I wasn't really considering, but, you consider what they did with McCord last year. You're right, maybe he does kind of vault into that top 7 or 6 range.
So you don't think this is the last thing we'll mention on the quarterbacks? You don't think there's any like resurrection story for Tommy Castellanos?
No, and I'm not trying to be a hater, and maybe it's interesting to pair him back up with Gus Malzahn, but like, here's the thing: like, Gus Malzahn coached Thomas Castellanos. Thomas Castellanos left. Like, is that a good pairing, or did
Yeah.
they not mesh well? I think ultimately Castellanos is small and just is not a high level thrower, and like, yeah, I mean, there's a world where they figure it out, but I just think that a guy who was mediocre at Boston College is not suddenly going to be awesome at
I'm
Florida State.
surprised Florida State, that's like where they landed. Like
Yeah,
that kind of shocks me. In some ways, like I feel like Chandler Morris for UVA is a better swing than Castellanos.
I would have Morris over Castellanos for sure. Morris over Castellanos for sure.
Yeah.
Granted, I'm not a huge Chandler Morris guy either. I think he was awesome at North Texas, but his numbers against Power 5 competition going back to when before he was at North Texas are not great, and so I just worry that he's kind of just a G5 superstar in that sense.
Last question before we move to ACC over unders. How high on this QB list can Drones realistically reach if things go right?
I mean, if things go right, and you're looking at maybe some of those fresh, or I guess they'll be sophomores, but like Mensa, Bailey, Lopez, they don't do well. They regress, have that second year slump. I think Drones can end up at 5 for
Okay.
sure. I think your top 4 is pretty set in stone, but I think 5 or 6 is up for grabs for sure.
Yeah. Could he finish ahead of Mensa and Moss?
I think so.
I think that's reasonable, right? I
Yeah.
don't think he's going to finish ahead of Jennings.
No.
I'm not seeing it, but Jennings could have a step back. Beck could be a disaster. Klubnik could get hurt. We don't
It is
know
the
how this is.
ACC.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's the ACC. Like 2 years ago, we thought like we had all these quarterbacks and nobody did it. I mean, NC State's brought in 2 different guys the last 2 years and they both sucked. And
Yeah.
so why will Bailey's fate be any different?
Mm.
There's so many moving pieces in this conference. I think once again, you've got a high upside of quarterbacks. There's some quality in this conference, and they kind of dismissed it on the most recent Cover 3. But I think there's at least 6 guys that could have really really nice years, and maybe throw Bailey and a Drones in there, and you get to 8.
You
Maybe
got
you
some
can,
wild cards for sure.
something like that. All right, let's move to the over unders. Let's make some people some money here, Rob.
Hey.
These are the futures for ACC football. So these are the win totals. You'll see them on your screen. The number 1 in the conference is Clemson. They come in at 9.5. Everything ends in a 0.5 because you're going over under, and these are from FanDuel. And I was going to ask Rob for his favorite plays in the ACC this year for your win totals, and what overs, which unders do you like?
The overs that I really like, I think Clemson over 9.5. I mean, Josh Pate had him. Was it Josh Pate who had him number 1 in the country?
I think they were one. They might have been Pate number 1, and then ESPN had them like 2 or 3.
Right, and so to get them at a 9.5 total in the ACC just feels like a pretty good value there. Yeah, so I like Clemson over. I think I
I'm with
like
you on that.
SMU. I think I like SMU over. I don't maybe feel as great about that one, but I do feel like with Jennings and that sporting cast, they got to fill the Brashard Smith void because as a running back, he carried a lot of load for them. But I think as long as they're able to do that, they should be able to kind of just outscore most teams in the conference. And then the other over that I like is Syracuse 5.5. I feel like what Fran Brown's got going there, I was skeptical because I knew he was a great recruiter, but I didn't know how he would actually adjust to the, coaching part of it. Being a first-time head coach who'd never been a coordinator before, he blew my expectations out of the water.
Yes.
And frankly, I think to project him to be right on that will he or won't he make a bowl line is a little disrespectful. And I know they had some losses. Lost McCord, LaQuinn Allen.
Their schedule's also tough. Like
schedule is tough. Sure.
There's no doubt. They haven't, especially early in the season, I think they got some tough games.
I like them over. I think they finish in that 6 or 7 range. And then as far as unders, Florida State. Come on. What are we doing?
I'm with you, dude. Under 7.5. Because I don't think it's going to be as bad as maybe you do, but 7 to me is a max with Tommy Castellanos.
Yeah, I see 4 and 8 personally, but UNC under.
Yes.
Yeah.
This is where we align because again, UNC could win 7. They could. It's the ACC. But 8? Is UNC really going to get to 8 with their top linebacker walking out of the door in spring? With who's the quarterback? Oh, Lopez. We just talked
Lopez. Yeah,
some potential there with Lopez, but what's around him? I just don't know if there. It doesn't seem remotely possible for me, for them to get to 8 wins.
No, for sure. I think, and maybe I've talked about this on this podcast before, maybe not. But to me, North Carolina's entire identity has been not defense.
Yes.
And you're bringing in a defensive-minded guy with a questionable, at best, offensive system. That is a square peg in a round hole. That is Brent Venables' first year at Oklahoma. But the difference is Brent Venables had a gazillion 5 stars on the roster. Bill Belichick does not.
And Brent Venables coached in college for his entire career.
Yeah, good point. Yeah. And
I want to bring up one thing about UNC as well.
Yeah.
Week 2, Rob, you're all over this. Charlotte. They play Charlotte week 2 at
Gary
Charlotte.
Richardson Stadium, baby.
That is scary.
It's not, but I like to say that it is. Charlotte is going to suck this year, but I don't know. They hired the coach from Ohio who, he manages to just, he led them to their first MAC championship this past year. So, he's a great coach.
He was a hot coach. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. That was honestly a pretty big grab by Charlotte.
Definitely.
I think looking at their schedule, have 2 Big 12 non-conference games with TCU and UCF. Not
at
easy.
UCF too.
At UCF, you have Clemson on the schedule, and then you end the year with your 3 biggest rivals: Wake, Duke, NC State. 2 of those games are on the road.
Yeah,
and
Wake
probably
might have their
Wake.
Shit together by then.
Right. You're not winning more than one of those games. You're just not.
Yeah. So I earmarked the 2 Big 12 games. Now UCF should be bad. Scott Frost is back, but they should be bad. But TCU, I think, is a loss. If Senny Dykes has any respect for himself, he's going to win that game. But then at UCF, these were the danger games. Clemson at Cal, I don't think is a given. I just that's a long trip. You don't know what could happen. At Q's, that's a nightmare. going to the Dome. No one likes that. Duke rival. Manny Diaz is shown to be solid, and he's got a good quarterback at NC State. Like that's a lot of games that's going to keep you from getting to 8 wins. And so I like the UNC under. Let me give you a couple of my other ones that I really like. Clemson over 9.5, with you on that 100%. Yep. Even if they lose to LSU week 1, which isn't all that likely, I think they run the table in the ACC in the regular season. Louisville's their toughest game on the road, and they get SMU at home, and then they have to go to South Carolina at the end. But do you really think they're going to lose 3 games? I do not. So I'm going to go Clemson over. I like Miami over 8.5. I'm higher on Miami than you, because I'm higher on Beck than you are. But I just think they've made a lot of improvements to that defense, and that was really held them back last year. Is the Syracuse comeback? Their defense couldn't stop anybody. We were scoring at will for a minute there, and so
sure.
I like Miami over 8.5. FSU under 7.5, with you on that. I think you got to take Cal under 6.5, despite me thinking they might win a game here or there. Like under 6.5 for Cal, I think, with the mess that's going on with Ron Rivera and everything, that it's not a good situation out there.
No, that's honestly a shocking line. That and UVA both being 6.5, I think, is baffling.
It's embarrassing that we have the same line as UVA and Cal. Like that sucks.
Is it worse though to be Pitt and have a line worse than those?
Yeah,
schools?
I'm not. Yeah, and the thing about BC and Pitt, can't touch them. Like, who the fuck knows? Like, nobody knows what those 2 schools are going to do. So, but Cal, take the under 6.5. Syracuse, I'm with you on that. I think they get to a bowl. I think they get to 6 wins. I don't think Fran Brown, despite me thinking they're going to have a step back, it's not going to be that big of a step back. So I think they'll get to a bowl. And UVA not winning 7 games. Come on. I know their schedule is bad. It's a very easy schedule, but they're not winning 7 games.
No shot. I mean,
not in the regular season. That's what this is. These are regular season totals.
Yeah, I mean, one of the only coaches ranked below Brent Pryor. What are we doing here?
Right. At least we're better than Tony Elliott. It is a sad state of affairs that both Virginia power school coaches are in the 60s. Like, that is shitty. And if Mendenhall was still at UVA and hadn't quit on them because UVA is terrible and he didn't want to be there anymore, they wouldn't have a coach in the 60s, but they do. And so do we. So we'll see what happens, but I do feel good about UNC under, Miami over, FSU under, Clemson over, Cal under, Syracuse over, UVA under. For those that you follow. Most of me and Rob's align there. So we didn't disagree on any, I don't think.
No, I think the Miami one is probably the one that I'm on the fence the most about. And it's because
true.
I see them truly 9-3 or 8-4. Like, I see them right in that range. Yeah. And I think while you did point out that they beefed up their defense a little bit, which they needed to do, I think their offense on the flip side will take steps back.
For sure.
Because you're losing the number 1 overall quarterback. You're
losing Restrepo.
You're losing Restrepo. You're losing Arroyo, the tight end, who went in the – did he go second round?
He went way earlier than I thought
early.
He was going to go. Yeah.
And then you lose Martinez, the running back, like, who's a monster. Both of those guys got drafted to Seattle, by the way, which that should be a little fun pairing. But
you got 2 on the Titans and a couple on Seattle.
Yep.
All right, Rob, I think that's going to do it for the show. Thank you for your contributions.
Of course.
Great research, great insight, as always. Make sure you guys are following us on YouTube. It's the Sons of Saturday channel. Subscribe if you're watching us there. Make sure you're subscribed to Too Deep on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you get your podcast, as well as Billy and Pat and all the other people that appear over on the Sons of Saturday channel on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. But this was a lot of fun, man. Like, I drank some good beer. We got to chat. Of course, it goes longer than I expected, but we once you get us going, it's hard to stop.
Yeah.
But no, that was fun. The reason Sam's not here is he's handling some business. He's maybe looking for a new job, looking for a new apartment. His whole life is changing. Sam is in flux. We got to give him just a minute here. And I think he's got a vacation coming up too.
Yeah.
So
Sam is always doing something.
He's a busy man. He runs our website and he contributes to this show. And I may have to tap you or somebody else in the next couple of weeks while he's away to help me out with the show. But for now, that's going to do it for the show. We appreciate you guys being here. And until next time, go Hokies.
Go Hokies.